All right, welcome to our shared plans, separate permits, and supplemental permits workshop. Quick introductions on our presenters today. Myself, I'm Shannon McEwen, Manager of Building Permits. We have Stacy Rainwater, she's our Supervising Building Permit Specialist. Tarek Shalon, he's our Assistant Manager of Plans Exam. We have Maria Caseko, she's the Assistant Planning Manager of the Comprehensive Planning Department. We have Justin Norfleet, he's our Senior Engineer and Architect. We have Emily Bernard, she is our Supervising Building Permit Specialist. Lori Bush, she's our Building Permit Specialist. And we have Matt Brewer, our Manager of Inspections. Sandy Linehan, our Records Technician. And also present with us today is Ava and Selena. They do all the hard work of helping us with the tech systems part of putting this presentation together and getting it on our YouTube channel. So with that, let's go ahead and begin. So what are shared plans, separate permits, and supplemental permits, and what are the differences? Shared plans are when we have multiple permits that share the same set of plans, and the primary permit, or maybe the main building in that project, the largest maybe, will be the one that has all of the plans included in that application number. And any of the secondary permits that are going to share plans with it will not have any plans, and instead a placeholder document will be uploaded, and in place of the plans that will say all plans are to be reviewed and approved under that primary permit number. Separate permit is when there's a permit that's part of the project, but it has to be submitted separately. So maybe it's a trash enclosure or a grease interceptor, but we can't include it with the building permit. The scope of work is just for that particular building. And since that's outside of that building envelope, it requires a separate permit. There's a lot of reasons as to why we require these separate permits. Some of them are contractor license requirements. Some of it is just the way we process that different type of permit, the type of reviews that are required, inspection requirements, etc. And then we have supplemental permits, and they're permits that are related to the permit, but they cannot be reviewed and approved as a revision. And so we put them into a supplemental permit, and when you apply for those, the scope of work will be, this is a supplemental permit to whatever that building permit number is. It supplements it. So for separate and supplemental permits, the separate permits, they can be different permit types, different buildings, structures, or improvements. Some examples of those would be walls and fences, detached accessory buildings, signs, site lighting, pools and spas, or grease interceptors. And then with the supplemental permits that, are just supplement that other permit, maybe some examples of that would be adding linear footage to a block wall. Unfortunately, we cannot do that as a revision because it's adding that footage, and our software is not designed for that, and our processes aren't designed for that. So we would do a supplemental permit in that case. Or if you're increasing the decking or water surface area of a pool, spa, or water feature, that permit type can't accommodate that as a revision, and so we would do a supplemental permit. And then we have the very rare situation where sometimes we just need a replacement permit. If you pulled a building permit for a building and it was designed as a 2-story building and it was, 10,000 square feet, but you've done some value engineering and the design changes that you've done that you want to do as a revision are really significant. So for us, it's so significant that it's like we're reviewing a different building. And in that case scenario, we're going to move you over into a replacement permit, so that we can make sure all your fees are corrected, everything that needs to happen. And we'll work with you closely to make that as seamless as possible, and so you don't lose any time. But that's a rare situation, but we have had to exercise it a couple times just to make sure you get a good end product of what you need for your project in a timely manner. So back on the shared plans, just wanted to emphasize a couple things on this. First and foremost, it's an optional approach. You don't have to share plans. And when you are wanting to exercise this optional process to share the plans, you want to be mindful of a few things. One of them is that all the permit applications that share those plans will have to be approved in order for any of the permits to be approved. So if you have that secondary permit that doesn't have any plans and has a placeholder, and it's approved, but the permit that has all of the plans isn't approved, you're not going to be able to get that permit. So it's an all or none type of situation since it's shared, so keep that in mind. And they just hold each other up. Also, the permit application with the actual plans, calcs, and documents, it gets issued prior to all the other applicants that share plans with that permit. So it has to get issued first when it comes to the issuance. They all need to be approved, and then that application needs to be issued first. Obvious reasons, we need an approved plan set out there on the site for our inspectors. And then another thing to keep in mind is when you have a shared plan and the permit is issued, it no longer can share once it comes to revisions. It doesn't work. We tried it when we first went live with this process, and it pretty much was a disaster. It didn't work out well for our customer. So you can share the plans for that initial permit review and issuance, but then after that, any revisions need to be submitted into their respective permit. And this is a particular item that the design professional will need to be aware of because of how he's designed his plans. You can still have that shared where some details were shared or whatever, but when you submit in for that revision, that plan is going to need to be clarified that it's just for that particular permit, and other information related to the other permits would need to be marked off or shown as not a part of that revision. Also, new permits cannot share plans with a permit that's already issued. It has to be set up in the original application as a shared plan in order for it to work correctly. And then just another thing to keep in mind is for standard plans, when you have condos and apartments, for instance, and they use that 43 number, for those of you that are familiar with that process, they act like a shared plan because they do share plans. It's a little more complicated than the shared plan process we're talking about today, but those standard plans cannot defer trust calculations. So this is an instance where the shared plans would likely be the best process for you to use. And then also just keep in mind when you have revisions to standard plans, the revisions have to be submitted under the 43, and they're not submitted under the actual building permit unless it's a field fix only, because those actual building permits don't have any plans in our records. We house all of the plans in the 43 number. So that's just a little general information on that. And now I'm going to get into plan submittal when you do those application for the permits, and I'll turn over to Stacy Rainwater so she can talk to you about that process.
Hey everybody, thanks Shannon. So I'm going to try not to really reiterate a bunch of stuff that she said, but my slides do cover a little bit of those just because they're reminders that we like to share at the submittal stage. So typically if you have a site that you're wanting to build out and it includes multiple buildings, we understand that those designers tend to create one comprehensive set of plans. So we're not really wanting to make you break them out and separate them all up and create a much more work on your end. So that's why we've come up with the shared plans process, as Shannon has mentioned. So again, typically, if you have multiple buildings, you're going to need a building permit for each additional building or accessory structure. That could be, 2-3 warehouses, a couple of trash enclosures, carports, etc. Typically, we'd like to see a separate grading permit. If you've got multiple buildings, 2 or 3 buildings on one site, you're going to need a separate grading permit. There are times that we do building with grading, but that is usually reserved for one building. Site walls, fencing, access gate permits, or access gates rather, all require separate permits. Signage is often included in these comprehensive plan sets, but again, those are something that would require a separate permit. So you typically will get an additional information notice that's going to request you to apply for those separate permits. Again, back to the comprehensive plan set, sometimes they're going to show things on there that you really don't want to have permitted. So in that case, we would just ask that you mark those plans and details out, or maybe add a note to your cover sheet that these particular items are not a part or under separate permit. And then if it's clearly marked, we're not going to ask you to apply for another permit for it. So again, sometimes when you apply, you might face delays just because we are needing those additional permits. So if you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to us at the ePlan submittal email address, and we'll be happy to help you out. We offer pre-submittal meetings if you're just not sure what you're, going to want or need. We're here to help you out in that way. And then one tip just to mention, always make sure that you include a clear and concise scope of work on your cover sheet. Make whatever not a part notes you have, and then provide an index so that way we'll know, what's included in your application. Next slide, please. So when you're applying for a shared plan or separate permit or supplemental permit, you're going to apply for that permit just like you would any other normal permit. We're going to need a completed application form with the description of work and a separated valuation for just that piece. And then once you get to that upload stage, this is where you're going to come in contact with your requirements. So it's going to tell you architectural plans. So what we want you to do is upload a placeholder document, and it needs to be PDF, like all of our files have to be PDF, but it's going to refer us to the main plan holder, or as Shannon referred to, maybe the biggest building. So whatever permit that is going to be your main library, for lack of a better term, of where you're going to have all your plans. That's the permit number that you're going to want to refer us to on that placeholder. And then you'll want to make sure that you categorize it as whatever it is. If it's architectural plan, if it's a site plan, because sometimes that requirement list will vary depending on the permit type that you're applying for. So just make sure you categorize it as the correct required category type, and you should be good to go. You're going to click continue through that whole file validation and processing steps. Once you click finish and you get that pending status, that's when you know, and you'll also get an email. That's when you'll know that we have received your application for processing. It's important to note that when you're doing that, say for example, you have a correction. Let's just say you submitted through plan submittal and we didn't catch it that you had an additional required permit. If you get a correction notice from the plans examiners that you need a separate permit, when you're applying for that permit in that name field, it would be helpful if you would put something like supplemental to and then list the BD number, or even use the shared plans. If you know you've attended this workshop and you've got it all down, if you want to put that shared plans in the name field, that'll just alert us that, okay, we need to be on the lookout for more permits or whatever. It'll also indicate to us that you've attended this workshop. So yeah, that's what we are looking for. Again, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us. eplansubmittal@clarkcountynv.gov. So our next slide is it's a little bit of a repeat of what Shannon said. Permits that do not share plans, we don't allow grading to share plans. And that's because that plan is going to go through other plan reviews as well. That doesn't work well with the shared plans process. Perimeter fencing, retaining walls, that's something that we don't like to share plans because that could, affect grade. Access gates, that's one that we don't typically share plans with, just because there's a fire prevention component and review included in that permit type. So we wouldn't want to hold you up because we don't have the same kind of review timeframes there. So we encourage you guys whenever possible to separate your access gates from whatever perimeter fencing or other fencing that you might have on your site. Site lighting, solar. So again, those don't share plans. So if you wanted to talk about that more, we could probably do that offline. And then also what we want to do is maybe think twice, about submitting for shared plans for things like carports or something that's not going to be constructed until much later in the process, only because we don't want you to be, having a hard time at the end with either contractor licensing issues or expired permits because you pulled a carport permit but you're not going to be building it for a year and a half. So if you're not sure, always reach out. We'll be happy to walk through that with you. And then on the left side of the screen there is basically an example of how a shared plan is going to be broken down in our system. So if you were to look at that and You know, it might look like a bunch of mumble jumble at first, but then when you get in there and you see, oh, okay, all the plans are under this one permit number. Here's the list of shared plans. So in this case, we've got 2 buildings. And then for reference only, of course, they're not going to share their grading, but then in this case, they didn't decide to share their trash enclosure. So I just want to point out, this is not a requirement. It is completely up to you as a customer if you want to do the shared plan process or not. And we're here to work with you. So if you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to us. And I think that might be my last slide.
Yep, that's it. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
And just so you all know, Ava has shared the e-plan submittal email in the chat session, and that is eplansubmittal@clarkcountynv.gov. So let's move on to building plans exam, and we will have Tarek. He is going to present to you what the building plans examiners are going to be looking for.
Good afternoon, everybody. So in plans exam, it's important to distinguish between deferred submittals and separate permits. What we would like to see on cover sheet of any project, section for deferred submittals and another for separate permits, or whichever one is applicable to the project. Not both might, you might not have to do both. But deferred submittals for us are allowed for building elements identified as part of the original scope, but the design and complete design for the element may still be undetermined. These elements are usually designed by a manufacturer, a subcontractor, or a specialty architect or engineer. And the design of structural element that provides stability to the building, including the lateral resisting systems, connections, are not allowed to be deferred. So anything non-structural can be a deferred submittal. Examples of deferred items are stairs, handrails, special ceiling designs, soffits, glass walls, storefront systems, and curtain walls, exterior wall systems like EFIS, exterior finish insulation system. Deferred building elements must also be shown conceptually on the construction plans, can't be just blocked out, and must be included in the valuation of the work for the building permit under review. The conceptual drawing for the building element must also indicate the intention to submit the detailed design later. And so that's where you would list that on your deferred submittal section on the cover sheet. Deferred submittals get submitted as revisions after the permit is issued. If they are deferred, if then nothing going to be included, no design for them. Next slide, please. Separate permits, as mentioned previously by Shannon and Stacy, will be required for items located outside the building footprint, in addition to items that require a specialty or separate contractor. So these may include exterior and or exterior signage, as mentioned previously, site lighting, grease and sand oil interceptors, blocking coolers, freezers, trash enclosures, EV chargers with pedestals. Those are considered freestanding structures. Carports, motorized and manual access gates, fences, retaining walls, fire alarms, sprinklers, conduit for future carports and solar, and future access gates, EV charging stations, on-site utilities, gas lines for future pool heaters, or fire pits, generators, and the like. So just because an item is shown on a set of plans does not necessarily mean it was approved to be constructed under that approved permit. So it goes back to the scope of work of the permit. All plans should include a concise scope of work, again, along with the deferred and separate permit sections. Next slide, please. So utilities for future use. So on-site utilities are under a separate permit always. For single-family residential permits that are issued for items to be constructed within the building footprint. This includes underslab utilities and lateral lines, attached items such as patio covers, carports, or garages, future electrical and plumbing lines for future barbecues, detached buildings, or fire pits shown on the plans as a stub out are not included with the house construction permit. A separate permit is required to install the underground or overhead lines that will service those structures. Commercial gas lines or electrical conduit outside the building foundation will also require a separate on-site electrical or on-site plumbing permit. Next slide, please. So for electrical, mechanical, and plumbing permits required, many permits can share plans. So to share plans, the plans will need to include all information necessary to determine code compliance for that item. For example, grease interceptors can share plans, although they require a separate permit. The original plan set cannot be approved until Clark County Water Reclamation District has reviewed and approved it. For the separate permit, the applicant would upload a PDF file placeholder, as previously mentioned, that reads approved plans or plans are to be reviewed and approved under that permit number as the plumbing plans. Other separate permits that can share plans are trash enclosures, generators inside or outside the building, walk-in coolers, type 1 and 2 hoods. If the share plans do not include all the information necessary to determine code compliance, a separate permit with plans will be required to be submitted. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing sub-permits. So when a building permit is already issued and the contractor or owner is adding mechanical, electrical, or plumbing plans after the building permit is issued, for it could be a site condition where they have to add, or just adding mechanical plumbing that wasn't there in the first place, and electrical. There's a specific process for that. So you would have to email corrections, building corrections at Clark County and v.gov, and they will provide the directions and activate the workflows for those additional disciplines so that you can upload plans and a permit application with evaluation, and then they will assign the review to a plans examiner. The plans examiner will then contact permit issue, informing them that this is new. Next slide, please.
I think that's it.
And then zoning can take it from here.
Yeah, and just a really quick on that, when you add the mechanical, electrical, plumbing to a building permit after it's issued, we don't want you to do it as a separate permit because it's, going to be a part of that building. So that's that special process. And when they get issued, they'll have the same permit number as the building permit, but it'll have a -E or a -M or a -P.
So it may be worth mentioning that this does not apply to structural. So we could add structural, I guess, as a revision to a permit that's already issued without having to go through this process.
Yes, good point. Thanks, Tarek. All right, so let's move on to zoning, and I will turn it over to Maria Caseco.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned previously, zoning reviews the building permits, whether it is a separate or supplemental permit, as determined and accepted by building department. So all our permits we review according to how they are set up by building department. Therefore, all shared permits for all structures, buildings must be shown on the site plan. Please label on your plans either shared and their permit numbers or not a part if it is not part of that review. Zoning reviews building permits in compliance with Title 30, which is another department. If there is an approved land use such as zone change, design review, use permit, waiver of development standards, administrative design review, or administrative deviations, all structures must comply with that land use. Some separate permits, for example, walls and fences, may require an approved grading plan permit. Okay, next. All permits and comments provided on the main permit number will be reviewed. All permits will not be issued until the main permit number is completed and issued. Conditions of approvals, if any, will be added on the main number unless there is a specific condition on an accessory structure or building. Next. Supplemental permits for accessory structures will require the approval of the principal structure. For example, a permit for a custom single-family residential is added to the already submitted accessory structures or buildings such as retaining wall, accessory dwelling unit, patio cover, pool house, or so forth. So that one will require the zoning will review the single family residence and all accessory structures submitted for compliance with Title 30 in terms of setback, height, design, lot coverage, if applicable, and separations. All other permits will not be issued until the review for the single family residence is completed and issued.
Thank you so
I think I'm done.
Maria. Yes, you're
Thank you.
done. Thank you very much. So basically on residential, you need that single family residence because it's the primary use of that property. So before you
Yeah.
could have anything accessory to that primary use, your pools or accessory structures, you have to have that house first to establish that primary use for zoning, right, Maria?
That's correct. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to engineering. And I will turn over to
Justin.
Justin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Yep.
So when submitting to structural and geotechnical, all the comments and issues will be returned under the main permit. Then each shared permit is going to receive a comment similar to the one pictured here. It says, please address issues under shared permit to avoid permit delays. Answer issues under each shared permit every time corrections are submitted to the main permit. And what this is recommending as a best practice is that each time you're answering corrections under the main permit, you also want to answer them under each of the shared permits, because when the main permit is actually approved, if those other shared permits haven't been kicked back to us, then there could be a delay in when those permits are approved. And then on the next slide, as mentioned a couple of times, the deferred submittals and special inspections and scope items really need to be clarified onto each permit scope. So the special inspections will be added to each individual permit, and then those requirements will need to be addressed on the final report of each permit. So while it's not the intention to add any special inspections to permits that might not require them, if the clearer that it is on the cover pages of which special inspections apply to which items will help us make sure that those get added to the correct permits, and that when the final report comes due, we don't have issues with special inspections being on incorrect permits. And similarly for deferred submittals, each deferred submittal will generate a hold which is a lot of times at framing. So if there's a deferred submittal hold on a permit that wasn't supposed to have it, then that could cause a delay later on in the permit. So just the clearer that it's delineated on the plans for which special inspections and deferred submittals apply to each permit scope really helps out. And then the next slide is about reiterating that when you're submitting these plans originally to get their first approval and get the permit issued, you're submitting them all to the main permit. But then when revisions come in, if you need to revise the trash enclosure, then you will submit the revision to the trash enclosure permit. And then the revisions for building A will go into the building A permit. Now again, these revisions and scope changes should be clearly defined and then clouded which details on the plans are actually being revised for that permit scope. This is because, as with the shared permits, these sheets can apply to multiple permits, obviously, and if the clearer you make it of which details actually apply to what you're trying to revise, the easier it is for our reviewers to identify what actually needs to be reviewed, and then that can help expedite the review process. And then I think it's on to the next person.
Thank you, Justin. All right, so you've got all of your plan reviews completed, they're approved, and we're going to start tying up the process so we can issue your permit. So then they will move to what we call plan coordination, and I will hand over to Emily Bernard and she can talk to you about that.
Thank you, Shannon. Once all the departments have completed their review and approved your plans, the permits move forward to our plan coordination team. At this stage, our team will add any necessary conditions required prior to permit issuance. For the purpose of the shared plans presentation, we will discuss the administrative hold conditions. The top one is an administrative hold condition will be added prior to final and will indicate that the permit with all the plans or your main permit must be issued first. The final inspection for any permit that includes plans cannot proceed until all associated shared permits are issued. Permits without plans will not be issued before the main permit. Once the main permit has been issued, it is important to contact our permit issue team directly so that they can clear the administrative hold seen here at the bottom prior to permit issuance condition. And when met, will allow the remaining permits to be released for payment. And if you have any questions, our email address is the eplanissuance@clarkcountynv.gov for assistance. Here is a list of the conditions that can be added to shared or supplemental permits. To see more detailed list of conditions for prior to permit issuance, please visit our webpage. And you can see that they vary from Las Vegas Valley Water to sewer to dust, so on and so forth. Once we've determined all our conditions, the permit moves forward to the pending fee workup status, and it proceeds to the fee workup team for completion.
All right, thanks, Emily. So let's move to fee workup, and Lori Bush is going to describe what that process looks like.
Thank you, Shannon, and welcome everyone. Like Emily was saying, once all the plan reviews are completed and the plan coordination team has done their tasks, the permit comes over to our fee workup team for fee workup. All of the permit fees, or for the building permit fees, are determined by the project valuation. The fees explanation and breakdown is actually in our 2018 administrative code. Here on the screen, it shows the links how to find that on our website, and you can look there. I believe that the fees begin at around page 52 or 56, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Our fee workup team shares not only fee workup, but we share the responsibility of checking all plans for stamps. So there's a complete set at permit issuance. And then at that point, we can address any approval stamp issues prior to the permit issuance. This is also true for shared plans. Because there's multiple permits associated with the main permit that has the main plans, we ensure that when we receive the approved main permit and get it ready for the fees, that all the associated permit sharing plans are also approved and the fees are complete as well. This ensures that once the main permit is issued, all of the other permits can be issued and a complete set's out in the field for the customer and for our inspectors doing the inspections. As far as the separate permits, when separate permits are required, whether they are sharing plans or not, evaluation needs to be based on the scope of the work for each permit. Do not submit the total valuation for the entire project under one application number. For example, if a project contains a new single-family residence, the detached garage, and a freestanding shade structure, the valuation will need to reflect the construction valuation for the scope of each of those permits. Continuing, for supplemental permits for valuation, project valuation, the construction for those permits with an additional scope, the construction valuation for a supplemental permit is based on the value of the additional work being done on that project. For those supplemental permits where we are having a reduced scope of work, the valuation to reduce the scope of work is determined by the cost associated with making a change. This is similar to a change order. There are fees associated with changing the project from its original design. Do not provide us with the original construction valuation used to assess the permit fees on the original permit. So for fee workup, there's a fees calculator, and if you're trying to get an estimate for your building permit fees, our website has our fees calculator. Here you will type in your project valuation and the fees will calculate. Remember, the fees calculator will give all the building permit fees, including electrical, mechanical, and plumbing. If your project does not include one or more of these, you can simply deduct those amounts from your total. We also collect other fees that are known as development impact fees that are not represented in the calculation link and are also not building department fees. These fees include the transportation tax, residential construction tax, multiple species habitat conservation plan, or MSHCP, formerly known as desert tortoise mitigation fee, or sometimes you'll hear people just say tortoise fees, a public facility needs assessment, or PIFNA, and the state water impact fee. These will be calculated and assessed at the time of fee workup. These fees are required to be collected prior to building permit issuance by ordinance, NRS, and/or the Clark County Muni Code, but are not building department fees. You can find general information on these fees here, as it's shown up here on the slide. If under the permit fees calculator, there's some links in there, like you can see on the first one for transportation tax, a code of ordinances under Title 422 that will give more information regarding those fees. Another great thing that here in our fee workup team that we're excited about is we have our own email now. So I don't know if Ava will put that up on the screen, but if you have any questions regarding fees, you can reach us at ccbd permitfees@clarkcountynv.gov. Thanks.
Thank you, Lori. Right, so let's get that permit issued. I'm going to pass it over to Emily so she can shore that up with you on how you pay for and get your permit.
Thank you. So once the fees have been completed by the fee workup team, the contact will receive the ready to issue email with all the fees required, and then a secondary email with the list of the prior to permit issuance conditions. Again, all prior to permit issuance conditions must be met before the system will allow payment. So as you see there, when you have a list, everything in that prior to permit issuance must be met. The most common mistake customers encounter is to add all their shared permits to their cart at once for payment, which will trigger an error message for the customer. To avoid frustration with shared permits, please make sure you always pay for your main permit first. This will avoid any message errors that you encounter. You can't just put all of them in your cart and pay for them. Once the main permit has been issued, then you can contact our permit issue team to release the administrative hold on the shared permits at the email address shown here, which is our ePlan issuance at clarkcountynv.gov. When all the conditions have been met, please keep in mind that only the listed contact can make the payment, the online payment. Customers can pay via credit card, bank account e-check, trust account, or wire transfer. Once the payment is accepted by our system, the customer will be emailed a copy of their receipt and permit directly. The plans will be made available for download by the contact listed on the permit. And if you have any questions about trust accounts or wire transfers, please feel free to reach out to our finance department directly for assistance at the email shown here on the bottom of the slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. All right, so you got your permit and you're ready to go out into the field and construct your project. So let's move on to inspections. And Matt Brewer, the manager of inspections, will educate you on that process.
Hi, everyone. So I'll start off by giving you all the information for contacting our supervisors or inspectors in the field if you have any questions with inspections. We have 5 geographical areas with 5 supervisors. Their contact information is listed there. We're open Monday through Friday for inspections. We even do Saturday inspections. But we are half staffed on Monday and Friday just to make up that difference of a split schedule. Okay, next slide, please. There's multiple ways to schedule inspections. Use the phone system. You can utilize the Citizens Access Portal. The bulk inspection program is working well, and actually you will be able to upload inspection documents on that very soon. We're testing that right now. We do have both types of inspections, in person and video inspections. The video inspections are primarily for simple water heater or HVAC changeouts. There is a separate link you want to utilize to schedule a video inspection. That's on the inspections main web page. You'll see schedule video inspection, and that'll take you to a calendar where you can pick your time and date of when you want the inspector to contact the technician for a video inspection. Okay, next slide, please. So to kind of go over a supplemental permit, how that works for inspections, let's just say you have a building and you had to increase the size of it or decrease the size of it. You'll have a supplemental permit. You want to make sure you call inspections under both of those permit numbers. You know, the supplemental doesn't take over for the original permit. It doesn't supersede it. They kind of work in unison at that point. So make sure you call all your inspections under both of those permit numbers all the way up until final so that we can close those permits out for you. All right, next slide. I know this has been gone over several times. You know, separate permits, inspectors are going to come out and be looking for this. If you have some work going on that's not covered under your original building permit, they're going to be looking for these separate permits. Anything outside the footprint of the building, anything that would be installed by a different contractor. So say your HVAC contractor has a mechanical permit, doesn't necessarily mean the walk-in cooler or type 1 hood has a permit. So if it's a different contractor, different scope of work, they're going to need a different permit. So I just wanted to warn you about that. Okay, next slide, please. This is kind of an example of what your plans would look like if there's separate permits on a project. They'll kind of list them all out and give you a notice that separate permits are required for these things. Just that's what it looks like when you look at your plans. Okay, next slide. And then this is just kind of a list of common items that require separate permits. All those things at the top. You have shell buildings and tenant improvements are all separate. Pedestrian protection elements, just everything that could potentially, not everything, but almost everything that could potentially need a separate permits on this list. And then at the bottom are common deferred items, trusses, elevated platforms, curtain wall assemblies, large mechanical, electrical, plumbing supports, guardrails and handrails. Now, deferred submittals will hold up framing inspections. You have to have those plans in and approved before we can do a framing inspection, because at that point you're starting to cover up connections and things that need to be inspected, and we need to have those approved plans before that stage. All right, and next slide. And this is just kind of an example of what it looks like. So we have a housing project. It's sharing plans. So it says that all the plans for this happens to be a trash enclosure, are located under the main permit. You go to the main permit and that'll actually show you the plans. So that was just kind of a graphical representation of that. And I think that was it for inspections.
Yep, thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Shannon.
So last but definitely not least, and very important for all of us, especially when you're needing to make any remodels or additions onto a permit after it's been occupied and it's years down the road and the building's up and running, is our records division. And I'm going to turn over to Sandy Linehan so she can talk to you a little bit about what records does.
Thank you, Shannon. Hello, everyone. So accurate data is critical to ensuring correct records are delivered, guaranteeing great customer service. Creating separate permits allows our customers and the records team to perform a more accurate search and create less confusion when trying to locate plans for a specific permit type. For example, single family residence, pool, fences, and detached structures. Maintaining accurate records is crucial to future homeowners as well as contractors for future improvements, remodels, or addition. Clark County is required by NRS and NAC to maintain and follow our approved adopted records retention schedules throughout the life cycle of each permit type. So if you have any records questions or records requests, you can contact us via email at dsrecords@clarkcountynv.gov, or you can call us. Our contact information is located at the bottom of this page. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. So just a quick little disclaimer here. At the time that we're presenting this information to you, this is all accurate and current and up to date, but we are constantly trying to improve our processes and improve our customer service levels. So keep that in mind, and for the most up-to-date and accurate information past this workshop, please visit our website to make sure, if we've had any changes to improve our processes, that you're aware of those. And every month we have these workshops, so we hope you join us. We have a YouTube channel and you can watch them there. However, when you attend them live in person, you're going to get the added bonus of being able to speak with all of the managers for all our divisions here and be able to ask any questions that you may have. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask Ava to stop the recording,